Why was the little girl sitting alone in a room full of soldiers? No one asked. No one even looked twice. The Montana morning just 3 days earlier had been crisp and blue, the kind of air you could almost drink. Maya June had kissed her grandfather goodbye at the edge of their small farm, his weathered hands steady as they adjusted the scope on his old hunting rifle. "Remember what I taught you, little warrior," he'd whispered, the gravel in his voice carrying decades of use. "Breathing, stance, and never let anyone tell you what you can't do." Now, 1,000 miles away, those words felt like they belonged to another life. Maya sat cross-legged in the corner of a sterile briefing room at Fort Bragg, sketchpad balanced on her knees. Her father, Dr. Michael Chun, was deep in conversation with Colonel Richards, an imposing man with silver at his temples and a voice that carried even when he wasn't trying. They were discussing Vietnam-era tactics for an upcoming book her father was writing. It had been over an hour. Her drawings filled the page. Armored vehicles, helicopters, the angular silhouettes of rifles. Maya wasn't like most 8-year-olds. Her fascination wasn't with cartoons or dolls, but with precision and discipline, qualities her grandfather had quietly shaped in her during years of early mornings and patient lessons in the Montana wilderness. A sudden blast from an air horn jolted her from her sketch. Boots pounded against the pavement outside. She darted to the window just in time to see a squad of men in camouflage jogging toward a long, low building bristling with American flags. "That's the SEAL training facility," Colonel Richards explained when he caught her staring. "Some of the most elite marksmen in the world." The word sparked something familiar in her chest. Back home, marksmanship wasn't just a hobby. It was an unspoken tradition. Mornings spent in the cool air beside her grandfather, learning to slow her breathing until even her heartbeat seemed to wait for her. She remembered the weight of his approval when she placed a bullet exactly where she meant it to go. "Dad, can I go look?" she asked, already half standing. Her father glanced at the colonel. Richards waved a hand, distracted. "Sure, sweetheart. Just stay in the observation area. Don't touch anything." She moved fast, sneakers silent on the polished floors. The fluorescent lights overhead. The range was different from what she knew. Glass partitions, reinforced walls, the tang of gunpowder and oil drifting from beyond the observation deck. Through the glass she saw the soldiers, broad-shouldered, every movement deliberate. Their gear gleamed under the strip lights, and their voices carried terms she knew. Groupings, wind compensation, words her grandfather had drilled into her as naturally as teaching her to tie her shoes. One of them, a giant of a man, was glaring at a target pinned up for review. "Damn wind threw me off," he muttered. 3 inches left at 300. Maya tilted her head. Even from across the room, she could see the shot pattern. Respectable, but not perfect. She could almost hear her grandfather correcting him. Just a touch in the stance, a breath taken a half-second later. The air changed when Colonel Richards walked in. Conversation stilled. He had that kind of presence, the kind that pulled a room's attention without asking. "Gentlemen, excellent work today. Those scores put you in the top percentile nationally." Maya took a step forward, heart thudding. Her grandfather's voice was in her head. "Be respectful, but never be afraid to speak." "Excuse me, sir." 20 pairs of eyes swung toward her. An 8-year-old in jeans and a faded Montana State t-shirt. Richards looked down with that patient, but busy expression adults reserve for interruptions they don't consider important. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you lost?" "No, sir. I'm here with my dad. He's interviewing you about military history." She kept her voice clear, steady. "I was wondering, could I try shooting? My grandpa taught me back home. I'd like to see how I do on a real military range." For a moment, there was silence. Then the dam broke, not a polite chuckle. Not the kind of laugh meant to take the sting out of a refusal. This was louder, sharper, the kind of laughter that didn't bother to hide its dismissal. The big man with the 3-inch grouping slapped his knee. "Oh, that's rich. Little girl wants to play soldier." Richard's smile thinned into condescension. He patted her head like a dog. "Sweetheart, these aren't toys. They're weapons of war. America's finest warriors use them." His hand gestured toward his men. "Why don't you go find your daddy? Maybe ask him for a nice doll instead." The laughter swelled, echoing against the concrete walls. Maya felt her cheeks grow warm, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was the same heat she'd seen in her grandfather's eyes the day someone at the diner had called him just an old-timer. A spark that meant you've just made a mistake. These ranges are no place for little girls. Richards added, voice pitched in that faux kindness that made the words sting worse. "Maybe when you're older, stronger, you can come back and watch the real soldiers work." Her fists closed tight at her sides. She scanned every face, committing each sneer, each smirk to memory. In her mind, her grandfather's voice was a low, steady drum. "When the world underestimates you, little warrior, you show them what you're made of." "Yes, sir," she said, calm, controlled. "Thank you for your time." She turned for the door. The laughter followed. Words hissed under breath. "Cute kid. Probably saw it in a movie." Kids these days don't know what real training is. Her father's eyes flicked to hers in the hotel parking lot an hour later. She'd been silent the whole ride, staring out at the pines, hands knotted in her lap. "Maya," he said carefully. "What happened?" "They laughed at me," she said, voice flat. "The colonel said the range was no place for little girls. That I should play with dolls." Something tightened in his jaw. His mind was already pulling threads. Stories of his own father, James Chun, the Marine sniper who'd come back from Vietnam with medals he never talked about. Men like Richards had underestimated him once too. They'd regretted it. "Maya," he said slowly, "there's something I never told you about your grandfather." He pulled up a folder on his phone. Photos. Grainy but sharp enough to see the young man in jungle fatigues, face streaked with camouflage, a rifle cradle bike, an extension of his body. "That's him in 68, Sergeant James Chun, 3rd Battalion, 26th Marines." Her breath caught. This wasn't the man who taught her to fish, who made pancakes on Sundays. This man's eyes were different. Dangerous. Focused. He wasn't just good, her father continued. He was one of the best snipers the Marine Corps had ever seen. Still holds a record for the longest confirmed kill in Vietnam. 1,847 meters. Over a mile. In jungle conditions. With equipment you wouldn't believe compared to today's rifles. The newspaper clipping on the next slide showed him accepting a medal from a general, expression as uncomfortable as it was proud. She thought of all those mornings he'd seemed to know exactly where she was aiming before she even lined up the shot. The way the other veterans at the VF treated him, a respect that went deeper than politeness. Why didn't he tell me? Because he wanted you to love it for the right reasons, not because you felt you had to live up to him. He wanted you to find your own reasons to be good. The next picture was her, 5 years old, his big hands bracketing hers as she held a rifle almost as long as she was tall. Her stance was perfect. Her focus absolute. He started training you young, because he saw it, not just talent. The patience, the discipline, the ability to shut out the world and just be there. Her eyes stayed on the photo, but her mind was back in that range. The smirks, the laughter. "Dad," she said, her voice sharper now, "I want to go back. Tomorrow." "I don't think that's. They think they know what I am because I'm 8 and a girl. They think they can dismiss me." She held up the photo. "I'm James Chun's granddaughter. I've been training for this my whole life, even if I didn't know it." He studied her face. The hurt had burned away. What was left looked a lot like purpose. "If we're going to do this," he said finally, "we do it right. First call we make is to Grandpa." When James Chun picked up, there was a pause after the question. Then, "Son, I've trained a lot of shooters. Some of the best in the course, but that little girl? She's something you see maybe once in a generation." There was another pause. "Why do you ask?" "Because tomorrow," Dr. Chun said, looking at his daughter, "she's going to show them exactly what a Chun can do." The old Marine's voice was warm with something that sounded almost like anticipation. "It's about damn time. How early does a day have to start for you to know it's going to matter?" For Maya, the answer was before sunrise. The light over Fort Bragg was a pale, fragile thing when she laced her sneakers. Her father's hand was warm and firm as they walked through the corridors, his stride steady but faster than usual. Somewhere in the distance, the muffled rhythm of marching boots carried on the morning air. She hadn't slept much. The hours between midnight and dawn had been spent. With a phone pressed to her ear, her grandfather's voice low and patient on the other end. "Breathing, little warrior. Remember, they'll expect you to rush, to make mistakes. That's when you slow down. That's when you remind them what steady looks like." She could hear his voice even now. Not just the words, but the cadence, the way it seemed to sink. With the beating of her heart, her father carried a worn leather briefcase, the kind that had been in their family longer than she'd been alive. Inside, safety certifications from the Montana Shooting Club, liability waivers he'd drafted himself, and, most important, copies of her grandfather's military records. The administrative building smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Colonel Richard's door was open. He looked up, irritation already forming in the crease between his eyebrows. "Dr. Chun, we concluded our interviews yesterday. I have a busy. My daughter would like a fair trial on your shooting range." Then, Colonel's smile sharpened. "I appreciate her imagination, but yesterday was enough entertainment for my men." "This isn't entertainment," Dr. Chun said, sliding the folder across the desk. "This is a legitimate marksmanship evaluation." Richards didn't look at the papers. "This is a military installation, not a daycare. My men, my daughter," Dr. Chun cut in, "is the granddaughter of Sergeant James Chun. Perhaps you've heard the name." The change was instant. The condescension dropped from Richard's face as if it had been wiped clean. His eyes narrowed, scanning the documents now. The yellowed newspaper clippings, the medal citations, the official Marine Corps records still taught in sniper schools. "James Chun is your father?" His voice carried less skepticism now, more caution. "And Maya's grandfather. He's been training her since she was 5. For a moment, Richard said nothing. The name carried weight. Every Marine knew the Vietnam record minus 1,847 meters. One shot, one life-saving kill. Even without meeting the man, the story was legend. Richards leaned back. "Even if that's true, she's still a child. The weapons we use, the distances, then you have nothing to lose," Dr. Chun replied evenly. "If she fails, we walk away and never mention it again. But if she succeeds..." The silence hung like a coin flipping in the air. Richard's gaze shifted to Maya. Her small hands were relaxed at her sides, but her eyes held the same calm focus he'd seen in the most dangerous operators he'd commanded. "Yesterday, you said these ranges were no place for little girls," she said, voice steady. "I'd like the chance to prove you wrong." He stared at her another beat before finally nodding. "Against my better judgment, we'll allow it. Full safety protocols. Modified equipment to fit her size. My range master supervises every shot." Within the hour, the rumor had spread. Soldiers who had nothing to do with the range found excuses to wander by. The observation deck filled, uniforms pressed, coffee cups in hand, expressions a mix of curiosity and disbelief. The sky had deepened to a bright, sharp blue by the time Master Sergeant Torres arrived. He carried a rifle unlike the massive ones in the racks. This one had been scaled down for her frame, a precision .22 caliber with a clean walnut stock and custom scope. Still, it was no toy. The tolerances were exact. The recoil, while modest, was real. Torres knelt beside her at the firing line. His eyes softened in recognition. "Your grandfather and I served together in '68. He saved my life with a shot. I still don't understand to this day. I'm honored to be here." Maya nodded once, understanding more than she could say around her. The murmur of the crowd buzzed low. Soldiers leaning to one another, not bothering to hide their smirks. Some were already taking bets. She might hit the 100, maybe the 200, but no way past that dot. She laid down on the mat, rifle resting against her shoulder, cheek to the stock. The world narrowed. The noise dimmed. All she could hear was her grandfather's voice. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The first target was at 100 meters, the easy one. Still, her first shot landed just outside the bullseye. Respectable, but not perfect. A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. "Not bad for a kid," someone muttered. She adjusted. The second shot cut the 9 ring. The third, dead center. Shift in the crowd was subtle but real. The smirk softened into raised brows. The laughter stopped at 200 meters. The difficulty rose. She breathed, adjusted, and sent 5 shots downrange. When the targets came back, they showed a 3-inch cluster, all in the 9 and 10 rings. Now, the murmurs were different, quieter. The word "she's actually hitting them" drifted through the deck, but it was at 300 meters that the air seemed to still completely. She settled in, feeling the rifle meld with her breathing. The first shot broke the silence, the impact punching the very center of the target. Through the binoculars, Richards froze. The second shot passed through the same hole. The third touched the same space again, so close the paper barely tore. Differently done by the 5th shot. The grouping would have been impressive for any seasoned sniper. For an 8-year-old, it was something else entirely. "That's impossible," Richards whispered. Torres didn't look away from the scope. "Sir, I think we're about to see something special." The 500-meter target loomed, the real test. Even expert marksmen lost points to the wind here. The grass bent in a steady cross breeze. She watched the range flags, counting in her head. Her fingers made a fractional adjustment to the scope. She exhaled and sent the first shot. 9 ring, just left of center. Another micro dash adjustment. Second shot. 10 dash ring. Third. Dead center bullseye. Phones were out now. A live stream was running. Somewhere behind her, but she wasn't aware of it. There was only the rhythm, the breath, the moment between heartbeat and trigger. Pressed. 4th shot. Perfect. 5th. Perfect. The grouping at 500 meters was tight enough to fit under a coffee cup. Silence. Pure, unbroken silence in a room full of men trained to keep calm under fire. And failing, she eased the rifle down with the same care her grandfather had taught her. Then she waited. Torres began the walk downrange to verify. Each step seemed to take an age. The murmurs were gone now. The only sound was the faint rustle of wind through the grass. Richards hadn't moved, binoculars hanging loose around his neck. He knew. They all knew. But the confirmation would make it undeniable. When Torres returned, his face was flushed, his voice almost breathless. 2.7 inches at 500 meters. "Sir, that's better than our best sniper." "Instructor, better than anyone we've had on this range." The silence broke all at once. Applause crashed over the deck, the kind that carried awe in it. Phones rose higher to record the impossible, but Maya didn't look at them. She looked at Richards, waiting. How long can a room stay frozen before it remembers to breathe? For the soldiers on Fort Bragg's range, the answer was just over 10 seconds. 10 seconds were an 8-year-old's. 5 perfect shots at 500 meters rewrote everything they thought they knew about skill, discipline, and the limits of possibility. When the first soldier began to clap, it was tentative, almost as if he wasn't sure whether the moment allowed it. Another joined, then another. The sound swelled, filling the observation deck, echoing against the concrete and steel. But Maya didn't look at them. Her gaze stayed locked on Colonel Richards, the man who had patted her head yesterday like she was a child, interrupting a grown-up conversation. The man whose voice had dripped with condescension when he told her the range was no place for little girls. Now his binoculars hung useless at his side. His eyes were on her, but they carried something new, something weightier than disbelief. He stepped forward slowly, the crowd instinctively parting for him. The applause faded to an expectant hush. Richards stopped just short of the firing line. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, in a gesture no one had expected, the colonel removed his cap and went down on one knee so his eyes were level with hers. "Miss Chun," he said, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance, "I owe you far more than an apology. What you did here today." He shook his head, glancing toward the targets as if they might vanish if he looked away. "In 30 years of military service, I have never seen shooting like that." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was respectful, the kind of silence soldiers give to something sacred. Maya's voice was steady, each word deliberate. "My grandpa taught me that respect isn't about size, sir. It's about skill, dedication, and never giving up when people tell you that you can't do something." It wasn't said as a challenge. It was said as fact. Richards nodded slowly, his expression taut with sincerity. "Your grandfather is a wise man, and clearly an exceptional teacher. You've honored his legacy today." She tilted her head slightly. "Yesterday, you told me these ranges were no place for little girls. I hope today shows you ability doesn't depend on age or gender. It depends on training, respect for the weapon, and the courage to prove yourself when others doubt." "You." The colonel didn't flinch. "You're right. I made assumptions based on prejudice instead of evidence. That was wrong. You've taught me, and everyone here, a valuable lesson." Behind him, Dr. Chun's phone buzzed again, the vibration. A reminder that the outside world was already catching the scent of the story. But here, in this space, there was still one more thing left to be said. "Colonel," Maya said, her voice quiet but cutting through the room, "I'd like to say something to your men." He stepped aside without hesitation. She turned to face the crowd. Soldiers, Army, Navy, Marines, men and women alike, their uniforms a patchwork of service and rank. They were watching her with an intensity she'd never felt before. "I know some of you are wondering how this happened," she began. "How a little girl from Montana could come here and outshoot some of the best soldiers in the world." She paused, letting the question breathe. "The answer is simple. My grandfather saw potential in me when I was 5 years old and could barely hold a rifle. He never let me settle for less than my best. He didn't train me to break records. He trained me to understand that excellence is about being better than you were yesterday." No one shifted. No one looked away. "Every morning for 3 years we practiced, not so I could show off, not so I could prove something to strangers, but so I'd be ready for the moment when it mattered. He taught me to respect the weapon, to understand the responsibility that comes with skill, and to never ever use that skill carelessly." Her eyes flicked toward the distant targets. Those shots weren't just about hitting the bullseye. They were about proving that when someone believes in you, really believes in you. You can do things other people think are impossible. A muscle worked in her jaw. Yesterday, you all saw someone laugh at me. You saw someone decide who I was without knowing anything about me. I'm not angry about that. I'm grateful, because it gave me the chance to prove that you can't measure someone's worth just by looking at them. When she stopped speaking, the silence was thick, heavier than applause could be. And then it broke, not with whistles or cheers, but with a deep, sustained clapping that seemed to carry more weight than noise alone. Richards turned to his men. Gentlemen, what you've witnessed today will be talked about for decades. Miss Chun has not only broken every record on this range, she's reminded us that excellence can come from the most unexpected places. He looked back at her. Miss Chun, I'd be honored if you'd consider returning to Fort Bragg as a guest instructor. My men could learn a lot from you. For the first time all morning, Maya's face broke into a small, almost shy smile. I'd like that, sir, but first, I need to call my grandpa. As if on cue, Dr. Chun's phone lit up with a familiar Montana number. He answered on speaker. Dad, you've been getting calls? James Chun's voice was warm, tinged with amusement. Michael, I've been hearing from old Marine buddies all morning. Something about my granddaughter and a shooting demonstration? Maya took the phone, her hand still steady. Hi, Grandpa. I did what you taught me. I showed them what a chum can do. There was a pause, and then the old Marine's voice came back, thick with pride. I never doubted you for a second, little warrior. How do you feel? She glanced around the room, at the soldiers, who now looked at her without a trace of dismissal, at Colonel Richards standing with his hands clasped behind his back in something like respect, at her father beaming quietly. I feel like I understand now why you taught me all those things, she said. It wasn't just about shooting, was it? No, he replied. It was about showing the world that strength comes in many forms, and that the most dangerous mistake anyone can make is underestimating someone based on how they look, instead of what they can do. The line was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, I'm proud of you, Maya, more than you can know. The call ended, but the weight of it lingered within hours. The video from the range, her calm movements, her impossible precision, her words to the soldiers had gone viral. News outlets picked it up. Olympic marksmen sent her messages of congratulations. Military forums lit up with debates, disbelief giving way to respect as the footage left no room for doubt. But in this moment, before the interviews and the attention, it was just her and the knowledge that she'd done exactly what she set out to do. Not just hit targets, not just break records, she'd made them see her. How far can one morning travel? By nightfall, the shots fired on a quiet Fort Bragg. Range had circled the globe. It started with a grainy phone video posted to a private military forum. By the time Maya and her father sat down for dinner in the base hotel cafeteria, it had been clipped, subtitled, and reposted on accounts with millions of followers. The caption was simple. 8-year-old girl just shattered every SEAL shooting record. The video wasn't flashy. No music, no edits. Just a small figure lying prone, firing slow, steady shots, and the stunned reaction of hardened soldiers, realizing what they'd just seen done by the time they reached their hotel room. Dr. Chun's phone was a wall of notifications. Interview requests from national news outlets. Invitations to shooting competitions from across the country. Messages from Olympic shooters offering congratulations. A Marine sniper instructor from Quantico had even sent a short, incredulous email. Please tell me this is real. Through it all, Maya sat cross-legged on the bed, polishing the rifle Master Sergeant Torres had lent her for the evaluation. She didn't check the news. She didn't care about the views or the headlines. Her grandfather's words still rang louder than anything on a screen. Strength comes in many forms. And the most dangerous mistake anyone can make is underestimating someone, That night, Fort Bragg was buzzing in a way even the most jaded officers admitted they hadn't seen before. Not about a new weapon system or a promotion, but about a lesson. And the person who had delivered it. The next morning, an official announcement went out. All personnel were to report to the main assembly hall at 0900. No exceptions. When Maya and her father arrived, the room was already full. Uniforms in every shade of green, brown, and blue. Conversations dropped to murmurs as they walked in, but this time there were no smirks, no sidelong glances. Just quiet acknowledgement. On stage, Colonel Richards stood at a podium, posture rigid but eyes clear. "Yesterday," he began, "I made a mistake. A mistake that played out in front of my men, and thanks to a certain video, in front of the entire world. No one shifted in their seats. I dismissed someone based on her age, her size, and my own assumptions. I told her she didn't belong on my range. And in return, she gave us a display of skill, discipline, and composure that shattered every record we keep." He looked toward Maya, seated in the front row, her feet not quite reaching the floor. "Miss Maya-chan, you didn't just outshoot Navy SEALs yesterday. You reminded us that the most important battles are often fought not against an enemy, but against the limitations we put on others and on ourselves." The hall was silent but for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Effective immediately, Richards continued, "Fort Bragg will change its visitor evaluation policy. Anyone requesting a trial, regardless of age, gender, or background, will be judged solely on ability, safety, and conduct. Not on appearance, not on assumptions." He stepped back from the podium. "Miss Chun, would you join me?" Maya walked up, her steps measured, the same way she'd approached the firing line. When she stood beside him, he removed a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a challenge coin, the kind given only for extraordinary acts or moments of deep respect. "This is from my command," Richard said quietly, "and from me personally. It's not for breaking our records. It's for breaking something far harder, the barrier I had in my own head." He placed the coin in her palm and closed her fingers over it. "Thank you for teaching us." The applause was not loud so much as solid, the kind that feels like it belongs in a hall with high ceilings and heavy history. Back in their hotel room later, Maya sat by the window with the coin in her hand. Outside, the base moved on. Humvees rolling past, cadets jogging in formation, the business of the military uninterrupted. But she knew something here had shifted. Her father knelt beside her. "You know, not every story ends this way. Sometimes, no matter how good you are, people don't change their minds." She nodded. "I know, but sometimes they do. And when they do, you can't waste the chance to show them why they should." He smiled faintly. "You sound like your grandfather." The flight home was the next day, but the last hours on base were hers to choose. She asked to go back to the range, not to shoot, but to stand on the firing line again. The mat was gone. The targets were fresh. But the view, that long corridor of grass, the wind playing with the flags, was the same. Torres found her there. He carried no rifle this time, only a battered thermos and a folded paper target under one arm. "This was yours," he said, handing her the target from the 500-meter mark. The tight grouping was still there, each hole clean, the paper soft from handling. "Thought you might want to keep it," Torres added. "I've been on this range a long time. Seen shooters who could put rounds on paper at distance. Seen shooters who could keep calm under pressure. Never seen both in someone who can't even reach the pedals in my truck." She grinned. "Maybe next time you'll let me drive it." He laughed, but there was a weight behind it. The kind of weight that comes when someone knows they've just witnessed something they'll remember for the rest of their life. That night, in the hotel, she called her grandfather again. "Everything's Packed? He asked. Yeah, but Grandpa, they changed the rules because of me. On the other end, she could hear the faint rasp of his breath, the sound of someone letting a truth settle before answering. Rules are just fences people build to feel safe, he said. Sometimes they keep the wrong people out. You didn't. Just climb the fence, little warrior. You moved it. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he added, when you get home, we'll go up to the ridge. The elk are moving early this year. Okay, she said softly. The next morning, as the plane lifted from the runway, Maya looked out at the shrinking sprawl of Fort Bragg. Somewhere down there was the range where she'd been told she didn't belong, and where she'd proven, one shot at a time, that belonging isn't given, it's earned. The headlines would fade. The videos would eventually be replaced by something newer, louder. But the coin in her pocket, the target in her bag, and the memory of the silence just before that first clap, those would stay. She leaned back in her seat, eyes closing, her grandfather's voice still with her. Legends are born. They're made. One perfect shot at a time. What does home look like when the whole world knows your name? For Maya, it was still the gravel crunch under her sneakers as she stepped out of her dad's truck. The scent of pine and wood smoke in the cold Montana air. The familiar squeak of the screen door to the farmhouse. But when she walked into the kitchen, her grandfather was waiting with a newspaper folded on the table. Her picture on the front page. It wasn't just a picture. It was that moment, lying prone on the Fort Bragg range, cheek to the rifle stock, her eyes steady on a target 5 football fields away. The headline read, Little Warrior, 8-year-old breaks Navy SEAL. Shooting records. Her grandfather didn't say anything right away. He just watched her take it in, his weathered hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee. Finally, he said, they spelled Chun right. That's a start. She laughed, but it was a small, uncertain laugh. Grandpa, it's weird. Everyone at school knows. The teachers keep asking questions. Even the lady at the post office said she saw me on TV. He leaned back in his chair. And what do you think about all that? I don't know. She traced a finger over the edge of the paper. I didn't do it for them. I just wanted to prove something. Then remember that. Fame's a noisy thing, Maya. You can't aim straight if you're listening to every voice in the crowd. She nodded, but the noise was already creeping in. By the end of the week, the mailbox was full. Letters from strangers, some from halfway across the country. Invitations to shooting competitions. Requests for interviews. A sporting goods company offered to fly her to Las Vegas for a convention. Her dad tried to manage it, but even he was overwhelmed. Some of these people just want a headline, he warned. Others mean well, but they don't know you. Not really. At school, things were stranger still. Some kids were in awe, asking her to tell the story over and over. Others looked at her differently, like she was something to measure themselves against. One boy muttered, "Try hard," when she walked past. Maya didn't rise to it. Her grandfather had taught her long ago, don't waste bullets on noise. She threw herself into their morning practice. The ridge above the farm became her refuge. The cold air, the stillness, the sound of the trigger breaking clean. It was the same as it had always been. But even there, change found her. One morning, as frost still clung to the grass, her grandfather set down his own rifle and studied her across the bench. Your groups are good, he said, but your eyes aren't as quiet as they used to be. She frowned. What do you mean? You're thinking too much about the shot after you take it. That's new. She didn't answer. But he was right. Every time she fired, a part of her wondered if someone would be filming, if the shot would end up online, if people would compare it to that day at Fort Bragg. You can't shoot for an audience, Maya, he said. The target doesn't care who's watching. Neither should you. She wanted to believe it was that simple. But in town, people kept pulling her back into the noise dot at the grocery store. The cashier asked for a selfie. At church, someone introduced her to a visiting reporter without warning. At the diner, an older man leaned over her table and said, "My nephew's in the Marines. You could take him easy." That night, she told her dad, "I miss it when nobody cared." He didn't try to fix it. He just said, "The attention will fade. But the people who know you, really know you, they'll see the same Maya." Weeks passed. The snow came in thick, muffling the valley. Life settled into a rhythm again. School, chores, practice. Then one cold January morning, her father came into the kitchen with a letter in his hand. Not an email, not a typed invitation. A real letter, handwritten on heavy paper. "It's from Master Sergeant Torres," he said, sliding it across the table. She opened it carefully. "Miss Chun, Fort Bragg hasn't been the same since you left. We've had more visitors ask for evaluation trials in the last 2 months than we usually get in a year. Some succeed. Most don't. But every one of them leaves talking about the day you were here. Next month, we're hosting an at the branch. Marksmanship event. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. For the first time, we've been authorized to allow a civilian exhibition. Colonel Richards asked me to send you the invitation personally. I know your grandfather will understand what this means. It was signed simply. Respectfully, MSG T. Torres. Her grandfather read it twice before speaking. They're not just inviting you to shoot. They're inviting you to stand next to people who've been doing this longer than you've been alive. And to prove Fort Bragg wasn't a fluke. She looked at him. "Do you think I should go?" "I think you should ask yourself the same question I've always asked you. Why are you doing it?" She thought about it for a long moment. "Because they still think it was luck, and I want them to know it wasn't." He gave a slow nod. "Then we train." And they did. Harder than before. Early mornings, late evenings. Longer distances when weather allowed. Finer adjustments. Mental drills in the cold until her fingers ached. One afternoon, as the sun dipped. Behind the ridge, her grandfather lowered his spotting scope. "Good, again." She reloaded, the brass warm against her gloves. She was tired, but she didn't say it. He studied her a long moment. "Maya, you've already proven you can hit the target. This time, the test will be whether you can carry the weight that comes with it." She didn't answer. She just settled in, the rifle cold against her cheek, and took the shot. "If you want, I can continue straight into part 6 next. This will take us to the interbranch event, the new level of pressure, and the emergence of a shooter who isn't there to cheer her on, but to challenge her. That's where the tension will spike again. What's heavier, the rifle in your hands, or the weight of every eye waiting to see if you'll fail?" The air at Fort Bragg was colder this time. February had stripped the trees bare, the wind cutting through the parade grounds with a sharpness that found the skin under your collar. The interbranch marksmanship event wasn't just a competition. It was a gathering of reputations. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, all in one place. All with something to prove. The main range had been transformed for the event. Large banners hung at each shooting station, the insignia of each branch catching in the breeze. Camera crews from the base's media team moved between the lanes, setting up tripods. There would be no quiet, no privacy. This was meant to be seen. Maya stood at the edge of the staging area, her case resting against her leg. Her father stood beside her, but it was her grandfather's voice she heard. "Breathe. Let them think whatever they want. The target doesn't care." A shadow crossed in front of her. "You must be the kid." The voice was deep, measured, with an edge of something between amusement and challenge. She looked up to see a tall man in Marine fatigues, his name tape reading Murphy. His sleeves were rolled tight around forearms corded with muscle. and his eyes had the steady stillness of someone who'd been behind a rifle more hours than most. People spent sleeping. "Staff Sergeant Ryan Murphy," he said, offering a hand she didn't take. "I've seen the video. Impressive for a demonstration." There was no sneer in his voice, but there didn't have to be. The pause before demonstration said enough. "It wasn't a demonstration," she replied evenly. "It was a record evaluation." Murphy smiled faintly, as if humoring a child's insistence. "Records are nice, but let's see what happens when you've got wind shifts, moving targets, and every top marksman from each branch shooting beside you." Then he was gone, moving toward the Marine prep area. Her father leaned down. "You don't have to prove anything to him." "Yes," she said quietly, "I do." The opening ceremony was brief, the base commander welcoming competitors, outlining safety protocols, emphasizing the spirit of inter-service respect. But Maya could feel the undercurrent. Respect had to be earned here when her name was announced. For the exhibition slot, there was polite applause, but also a murmur, the kind of low ripple that says we'll see. Her lane was positioned between the Army and Marine competitors. On her right, Murphy knelt at his station, adjusting his scope. On her left, an Army sergeant named Vega, her hair in a tight braid, her movements efficient and silent. The first stage was standard, distances, 100, 200, and 300 meters. The wind was steady, manageable. Maya moved through it without trouble. Tight groupings, clean breaks. She could feel the eyes on her, but the noise in her head was quiet now. Murphy shot well. His form textbook, his results precise. After the 300-meter line, he glanced her way, almost casually. "Not bad, kid. But this is where it starts." The next stage was 500 meters, the distance where the wind became a real opponent. The flags on the range danced unpredictably, gusts shifting by the second. Murphy went first. His shots were fast, confident. 4 10s and a 9. Maya took her position. She waded through 2 gusts, watching the grass at the far end, the shimmer of mirage in the scope. She squeezed, exhaled, adjusted, and sent the next round. 5 shots. 3 dead center, 2 just barely in the 10 ring. The crowd's reaction was different now, not just impressed, but leaning forward, paying attention. Stage 3 was where the real test waited. Moving targets at 600 meters. Life-size silhouettes. Gliding laterally, pausing for only seconds before shifting again. It was a challenge that punished hesitation. Vega went first, her rhythm deliberate. She landed solid hits but missed one entirely. Murphy stepped up. His approach was aggressive. Quick shots, bold leads. He hit 4 out of 5. The misses narrow but costly in points. When it was Maya's turn, she could feel the wind biting. Colder on her cheek. She locked onto the first target, waited for the half-beat she needed, and broke the shot. A clean hit. Her second shot came faster. Another hit. The third target paused for just a fraction longer. Perfect bullseye. By the fifth, the murmurs in the crowd had become something else entirely. Silence. The kind that holds breath. 5 out of 5. The final stage was a composite. Unknown distances, mixed stationary and moving targets, all on a clock. The kind of challenge meant to break rhythm, to rattle even experienced shooters. She took her place. The cold of the mat seeped into her elbows. Her breathing was steady. The whistle blew. Target 1, high left, maybe 350 meters. She dialed fast, fired. Hit. Target 2, moving right to left, slower than it looked. She adjusted her lead, hit again. Target 3 was farther, maybe 700 meters, barely visible against the tree line. She slowed down, let the scope settle, and took the shot. The clang of metal was faint but clear. When the final buzzer sounded, she'd hit every target. Every single one. The rangemaster called the scores. Murphy was good, very good, but the margin wasn't close. Maya had outshot him and everyone else. The crowd rose in applause, the kind that doesn't come from surprise anymore, but from recognition. Murphy approached her afterward, helmet tucked under one arm. Guess that video wasn't a fluke. It wasn't, she said simply. He smiled, and this time it wasn't faint or guarded. You're the real deal, kid. Don't lose that. What happens when the applause fades, but the echoes stay? By the time Maya and her father left the range that afternoon, the event organizers had already pulled the footage from the inter-branch match and sent it to base media. It wasn't even sunset yet, and a clipped highlight of her perfect moving target run had been posted to Fort Bragg's official channels with the caption, "Civilian exhibition shooter Maya Chun delivers flawless final stage." The views climbed faster than either of them could keep track of. The comments were a mix, awe, disbelief, and the occasional dismissal from someone who had never been on a range. Her father tried to keep her insulated from the noise. But in the days that followed, the noise began to find her in ways even. He couldn't block. The first call came from a local news affiliate in Raleigh, then CNN, then a well-known sports network that wanted to do a human interest segment. The requests weren't just from journalists. Two separate defense contractors asked if she would endorse youth-oriented shooting programs. Her father said no to almost all of it. "You're not a product," he told her. "We're not going to let people use your name to sell something." But inside the military community, her name was being used in another way, one she couldn't control. At bases across the country, younger recruits were invoking the Chun standard when talking about marksmanship. Some instructors welcomed it, using her scores as a challenge to their trainees. Others resented it, grumbling about how real-world shooting was different from range showmanship. Even among the veterans, there were divisions. Master Sergeant Torres called one evening to warn her father. "You've got some old-school types saying this whole thing sends the wrong message, that we're making a big deal about an 8-year-old instead of combat-tested shooters. Most of them haven't seen you shoot in person. But you know how pride works." Maya heard the words, but they slid past her. She was still thinking about something Murphy had said on the range after the match. "You're the real deal, kid. Don't lose that." What did "don't lose that" mean? Skill? Focus? Or something else? Her grandfather's answer came the next morning. They were on the ridge above the farm. The snow still crusted hard from the night's freeze. She'd just finished a tight grouping at 400 meters when he said, "The better you get, the more people will try to tell you what your skill should be used for." She lowered the rifle. "Like what?" "Some will want you to compete. Some will want you to teach. Some will want to stand next to you so they look better by comparison. And some will want to see you fail because it proves their world makes sense again." She was quiet for a moment. "What do you think I should use it for?" He met her eyes, his own steady. "That's not my call. But whatever you choose, make sure it's yours, not someone else's idea of what you owe them." The question was still in her mind when the letter came. This one wasn't from Torres or Fort Bragg. It was from the American Youth Marksmanship League, a national organization that trained teenagers for competitive shooting. They were holding a junior invitational in Colorado that spring. The letter didn't just invite her. It offered to sponsor her travel, gear, and training. Her father read it over twice. "This one's different," he admitted. "No cameras, no media circus, just competition. You'd be the youngest by at least 4 years." She looked at her grandfather. He didn't say yes or no. He just said, "If you go, you'll be on their range with their rules. And they won't be there to see a kid make a nice story. They'll be there to win." "Good," she said. Training shifted after that. Longer sessions. Drills under time pressure. targets at distances chosen at random. She learned to shoot in gloves stiff from cold, in light so low the reticle blurred. But something else started to shift too. One afternoon, halfway through a timed drill, she missed a shot she knew she should have made. The kind of miss that echoed in her bones. She reset quickly, but her grandfather didn't call for another target. "Stop," he said. She looked over, expecting a correction about her lead or her trigger squeeze. Instead, he asked, "Why'd you miss?" She frowned. "I didn't adjust enough for the wind." "That's what happened. I'm asking why." She hesitated. "Because I was thinking about the last shot instead of the one in front of me." He nodded once. "You can't chase or fear the shot that's already gone. The only one that matters is the one you're in right now. That's true on the range. And it's true everywhere else." That night, she wrote the words in a notebook she kept in her nightstand. The only shot that matters is the one you're in right now. By the time the Colorado Invitational came, she was ready, or at least as ready as training could make her. But when she walked into the competition hall, rifle case in hand, she felt the shift immediately. The other competitors were older, taller, and carried themselves with the easy confidence of athletes used to winning. Their rifles gleamed, their shooting jackets snug and broken in from use, and the looks she got were familiar, curious, skeptical, some openly dismissive. She didn't mind. She'd seen it all before until one voice cut through the room. "You're the one from the video, right?" She turned to see a girl maybe 15, with sharp eyes and a shooting cap pulled low. "Yeah," Maya said cautiously. The girl's smile was thin. "Don't expect these targets to stand still for you. Out here, you've got to earn it." Maya just nodded, but inside the words lit something. Good, she thought. Let's earn it. How do you measure yourself when the target isn't the only thing you're aiming at? The competition hall in Colorado felt colder than the Montana ridge she'd trained on. The air inside was still and dry, carrying the faint scent of oil and fresh plywood from the newly erected shooting lanes. Rows of benches lined the staging area, each assigned to a competitor, each bearing rifles that looked like they'd been tuned and cared for with surgical precision. Maya's lane was at the far end, near the exit doors. She liked it that way. Fewer people walking behind her. Fewer distractions. The announcer called the competitors to their stations. Around her, older teenagers tightened their shooting jackets, adjusted slings, and muttered to themselves in low, rhythmic tones. She noticed the girl who had spoken to her yesterday, the one with the sharp eyes and the low cap. Her nametag read Keller. She was 3 lanes over, methodically loading her first magazine. The first stage was at 300 meters, static targets, 10 shots. It was a warm-up for most, but here, even a warm-up mattered. Points would carry through. The entire event. The buzzer sounded. Maya settled behind her rifle, her cheek finding the comb in one smooth motion. Breath in, hold out. The first shot broke clean, landing in the 10 ring. She didn't look up, didn't allow the noise of other rifles to bleed into her focused. 10 shots. 10 hits inside the 10 ring. No reaction. Just reload. The second stage was 500 meters with a timed element. Each competitor had only 30 seconds for 5 shots. The point wasn't just accuracy. It was control under pressure. The clock started. She felt the time in her pulse, but didn't rush. 1 breath, 1 shot. Adjust. Second breath, second shot. By the 5th, she still had 2 seconds left on the clock. All 10 rings. Keller shot well too, but her 4th shot slipped into the 9 ring. It didn't seem to rattle her. If anything, she worked faster, almost daring the clock to beat her. By the halfway point of the match, Maya was near the top of the standings. But the hardest stages were still ahead. Stage 4 was a moving target at 600 meters. Crossing unpredictably, with the occasional pause to force split-second decisions. This was where most shooters bled points. Keller went first. Her style was aggressive, her timing sharp. 4 hits out of 5. Maya took the lane next. The target slid into view. Her eyes tracked it, but her mind went still. She wasn't thinking about Fort Bragg or Murphy or the reporters. She wasn't even thinking about the scoreboard. The first shot landed. So did the second. The third. Fourth. Fifth. Perfect. When she stepped back from the mat, she caught a glimpse of Keller watching her. Not with disdain now, but with something closer to calculation. The final stage was designed to break even the steadiest competitors. A mixed-distance course with unknown ranges and shifting winds. Each target worth different points depending on difficulty. It was the kind of challenge her grandfather had trained her for without her realizing it. Reading wind from the sway of grass, estimating distance from the haze of mirage. Keller was good. She moved quickly, making bold calls. On distances, she hit most, but missed a long shot on the far left lane that cost her heavy points. Maya waited for her turn, feeling the cold of the mat through her elbows. The range flags twitched in an irregular rhythm. She counted the beats, waited for the gust to ease. First target. Far right, small plate, maybe 450 meters. She broke the shot. Hit. Second, closer, moving fast. She led it by a fraction, trusting her gut. Hit. Third, the long one, nearly invisible against the backstone. She slowed her breathing, adjusted 2 clicks for windage, and squeezed. The faint ping came back a second later. She kept moving. No looking back. No replaying the last shot in her head. Just the next one. And the next. When the buzzer ended her run, she knew. Not because she'd been perfect, but because she'd been present. Every shot, in the moment, with no ghosts of the one before it. The judges tallied the scores. The room filled with the low hum of competitors repacking gear, trading quiet congratulations or shaking heads at missed chances. When the announcer called her name for first place, there was no eruption of surprise, no murmurs about luck. Just applause. Steady, certain, earned. Keller approached her afterward. "Guess you earned it," she said, her voice even. Maya shrugged lightly. "Guess we both did." The girl's lips curved into the faintest smile. "See you at the next one." Later, when the hall had emptied and the last of the snow was turning to slush outside, her father handed her the phone. "Grandpa wants to hear it from you." She stepped into the quiet of the entryway, the cold air brushing her face as she pressed the phone to her ear. "Well?" His voice came, warm with anticipation. "I won," she said. "But that's not the part I'm proud of." "Oh? I didn't think about the record, or the video, or what anyone else thought. I just shot, one at a time. The way you taught me." There was a pause on the line, and then his voice, low and certain. "That's the only way that matters." They didn't talk about scores after that. They talked about the ridge and the elk moving early again, and how the snow back home was heavier this year. Because the truth was, the medals and the records would gather dust one day. But the lesson, the one he'd planted in her before, she even understood it, would not. As the plane carried her back to Montana, Maya sat by the window, watching the clouds drift beneath them. Somewhere far below, ranges stretched across the land. Some she'd shot on, most she never would. But the targets didn't matter as much now. What mattered was knowing she could walk onto any line, anywhere, and be herself. Steady, present, unshaken by the noise. Her grandfather's words came back, the ones that had carried her through every doubt, every smirk, every bet placed against her. Legends aren't born. They're made. One perfect shot at a time. She smiled, just enough for herself, and watched the clouds roll on.